Week after week, I sit in this space and speak to you about walking with Christ, the fellowship of believers, the work and ministry of the church, and how to be a good member, a good productive member of Christ's community. But what if you don't want that? What if you're not interested in that at all? What if you just want to be a member of the church and not be productive, not walk in faith with the community? What if you want to really just be a bad church member? I think you're under-resourced. So today I want to share with you some tricks and tips that I think might help you in your quest to be a bad church member. The first thing I think that's essential to be a poor church member is to remember that the church is all about you. You are a consumer, and a consumer above all else. You know, our whole American society is based on consumerism. That's what we celebrate and worship. And certainly we should bring those values right into the church because it is a consumer and producer-driven affair. You are here to consume, and never forget that. Don't get confused by some of the preaching and teaching you hear about being people who are productive in their faith. If you want to be a church member as unproductive, remember, you're not here to produce. You are here to consume. You're here to get your money's worth. You're here to receive the goods and services, spiritually and religiously, at minimum cost to you. And that is your right and responsibility as a consumer. And so common to this is thinking of yourself above all else. Think of yourself as the most important person in the church and what the church is for. Never get confused about all that language about community and fellowship and mutuality. It's not about that. It's not about anyone else but you. And it's certainly not ultimately about God. I mean, in church we have this language, we call it worship. We celebrate the worship of God. We read that in the scriptures, we hear it in our hymns, we celebrate it in our prayers. But you know, if you're going to be a difficult and bad church member, you don't want to celebrate the worship of God because you really don't find any worth. The only worth really is in yourself and what God can do for you, not what you can do for God and how you can celebrate and magnify God's love and grace in the world. So don't get confused. Make sure that you are part of the church only to get what you want and the way you want it. Now, as a member, make sure then that you are merely a member in name only. Be a name on a list. That's what's most important. After all, the names of people on the list are the names of the people who are going to get to heaven. And that's what you're here for, is to get your ticket to heaven. So you want to make sure you're on that list. Let no one remove you from the church membership list for any reason whatsoever. Always protest, because as a member, you have rights to the church's goods and services as a religious organization. And that's the real purpose of being a member anyway, to make sure that you have those rights and resources available to you. So always be prepared to defend and assert your membership rights. Rights to be heard, rights to vote, rights to show up in a disruptive way, rights to not participate even, because those are all part of your rights as a member. And whatever you do, don't accidentally take any responsibility for anything. Because that might lead you down the path of producing, and that's not your core value. You are here to consume as a poor and bad church member. You are here to make sure you get what you want, not what other people get what they want. Let them worry about that. You worry about you. And so attend church then as little as possible. In fact, what I'd recommend is only attend when it feels good to your ego. For instance, attend when you have something to say, when you have a role to play that's public that will bring attention to you. Attend only in those kinds of circumstances. Don't attend to be in fellowship with believers or worship God, because you notice those things are not about you at core. Remember, it's all about you. You. Don't forget that, whatever you do. And one way you can keep your focus here is to think critically over and over again about the things that bother you in the church, the things that don't go your way. And this is especially useful if you have the discipline to major in the minors. In other words, don't think about the whole message of the church and the purpose of the church. Don't try to discern forward what the church should do. Focus instead on things like, I really prefer the 23rd Psalm in the King James Version, and so I'm going to be unhappy when it's spoken in the NIV version. Focus on minor things like they didn't sing the song that I thought they should sing on Easter morning with the old words that I like. Focus on minor things. Ignore the big themes, the big issues. Focus on those minor things and hold fast to them. And especially ignore the teachings of Scripture. Because if you listen to the Scripture, you're going to realize it's not about you, and that's going to confuse you. Jesus is always telling us these things about how it's the kingdom of heaven, not our kingdoms at hand, and that's going to throw you off track. You want to remember it is about you. Even Jesus is about you. You're not about Jesus. Don't get it wrong if you want to be a bad church member. And hold on to any way that you're offended. Cultivate your offenses. Hold on to them. Jesus says these things about, turning the other cheek and going the extra mile. But what does Jesus know about being a church member? You know way more about what to do. So focus on capitalizing on your offenses. And one way you can do this is to be somewhat volatile. If you're always angry, people will get used to that and discount you. But if you're inconsistently angry and hostile, people will attend to you. Because church people at core, they're easily cowed. They believe all that stuff Jesus said, and they tend to accommodate anger and frustration and out-and-out hostility, especially when it's ill-considered. They tend to accommodate that much more than they should and way longer than is wise. But that's because they've really bought in hook, line, and sinker those kingdom values. So take advantage of yourself. That's your leverage. That's your power. These people in the church are weaklings, and you can get what you want from them. From the church as an organization, from the pastor, and from the people by being angry. Make sure also, if you're going to be a bad church member, that you never enrich your faith life. We live in this time when there's all kinds of literature available more than ever in history about the Scriptures, reflections on God. There's all kinds of ministries that put forth YouTubes and podcasts. There's so many resources. Ignore all those resources if you're going to be a bad church member. They're just going to confuse you. You might get sucked into some of that way of thinking. Focus instead on what you want and hold tight to your prejudices. The real mark of being successful at being a bad church member is to be exactly the same person you are year after year after year and utterly unmoved in any way. Never mature, never grow up. Hold on to your, juvenile mentality. If you have a Sunday school level understanding of God, that is what you want to hold on to. Now, when it comes to communicating, I have some tips for you there too. Communicating with other members of the church and with the church as an organization. Always base whatever opinions you're going to communicate on just your prejudices, and do not confuse yourself with actual information. You don't need information. You don't need actual facts. What you need is to voice your own opinions, and make sure that your opinions are uninformed, unencumbered by the reality of facts and context. That's not useful at all. And make sure that you start rumors. One very effective way to get your opinion out there, but without taking responsibility. Remember, a core is not to take responsibility. Core tip is that you can start a rumor in someone else's name, but to do that not specifically. You can say, somebody said thus and so, and then tag that with your own opinion. And that way, you don't look like the person who has that opinion, but you can get it out there. And this will keep the church people sort of disrupted and unsettled, and it also makes everything opaque. And that's what we want. We don't want clarity in communication. We want confusion in communication. And also, if anyone tries to speak with you, put yourself in that place where they feel like they have to persuade you. There's great power in being rejecting, in being resistant, being hostile, either actively or passively. So make sure that they feel like they've got to persuade you. Be very grudging in your praise and eager and effusive in your condemnation. That really helps tighten up the organization, keep people sharp about meeting your needs. And one way you can do this is never read or listen to any of the information the church sends you. Don't listen to any of the videos. Don't read anything the board sends you. You see something, especially from the board of ministry, about what's going on in the church, you just hit delete when it comes your way. You just move on. That stuff is there just to confuse you. You know what you want. You focus on that. What I'm saying is here, always disengage and resist change, especially for no good reason. That is it. Now, I hope that you've heard in this that church is really about you. It's not about God, that you are the center. And if you keep just one thing from this video, remember that you are what it's all about.